The statue lay twitching on the floor, surrounded by a circle of flattened, overgrown vegetation. Although downed, it was still very much alive, and it appeared to be trying to regain control of its mighty limbs. Gorith, still standing by the gate, held his moonrod raised and was keeping his focus on the fallen automaton. The Crypt Cleaners were still recovering from the sudden gust that had seemed to explode from the statue. Lismond, having been thrown many feet into the air by its force, had then plummeted into a thick bush, which had taken the majority of his impact. Rolling out of it, in as dignified a way as he could muster, he snatched up the lunarite sword which had spilled from his grasp, before scuttling back over to his comrades.
"Have a good trip, Lismond?"
asked the Sun Priest, sunrod still raised, concentrating on the battle in front of him.
"Oh, boss, you were like an eagle. A drunk eagle, but an eagle nonetheless,"
noted Pepper.
"Here it comes again,"
exclaimed Ernon with some urgency, noticing the wizard's eyes starting to shine with moonlight. Feeling something strange building up, something of that lunar energy they were starting to get familiar with, they braced themselves for another potential blast. The new gust of air made them almost lose their footing again, and they saw the statue, which had tried to rise, being crushed against the floor by an invisible force. It was as if a giant invisible hammer, big enough to cover the entire body of the automaton, had struck it. And then they felt it building up again.
"Holy sun!"
Everything in a circle around the statue was being crushed and flattened by the wizard's continuous spells, and cracks were starting to appear on its body. The fissures in the animated contraption were growing. As it tried to push itself up, dust crumbled from it and the cracks widened. It was clear the brittle nature of the statue would be its undoing, and it would not last much longer. It was then that a loud, disembodied voice was heard.
"Enough! Gorith, my old friend, I shall welcome you and yours in, but please spare the automaton."
The voice spoke with an archaic accent, charged with emotion, almost to the point of exaggeration, like the voice of an actor. The wizard, however, ignored it completely and continued charging his next spell.
"I beg you, stop! Destroying it would be a tragedy."
A new spell crushed the statue, slamming it down, causing chunks of stone to break off and rattle into the corners of the garden.
"Gorith, I beg you, spare it. It is an ancient relic of our now lost era. There is no replacing it."
Desperation could clearly be felt in the incorporeal voice.
"You should have known better than to send your precious relics against me, old friend,"
finally answered the wizard impassively, as if destroying the statue was just something he now had to do. And with that last spell, the automaton was crushed into the ground once more, tearing open its many fissures. Body parts that were once mighty crumbled into multiple pieces, leaving it almost unrecognisable.
"An unpleasant host makes for an unpleasant guest, Yosamold. Let us both start anew, with this fresh reminder of what lies beyond the often so blinding veils of speech,"
continued the wizard, now with a smile, finally lowering his sceptre. The previously imposing automaton had been reduced to a pile of rubble. Its pulverised remains now lay scattered across the centre of the garden, motionless.
"And so, my moon-headed champion finally meets its end. Such passion and knowledge had been put into its making. My ancient contraption, so many centuries it had stood there, and now it is nothing but rubble, not unlike our own ancient kind. Nothing but rubble,"
lamented the voice, only to add a moment later, now strangely with a feeling of pleasure having replaced that of despair.
"Ah, you know me well, Gorith, my old friend. A beautiful exchange. I have just as much hatred for you as I have love. You are indeed welcome here. I have missed you."
And with those disconcerting words, the heavy iron gates of the walled garden started to open. The three companions followed their blue blood master through the halls and corridors of the fortress. To their relief, The wizard had ordered them to leave the wooden chest behind, saying that Yosamold would take care of it himself. As such, they were able to spend time appreciating their surroundings and taking in the rich artistry of the building's architecture. The whole fortress was beautiful, a place of contrasts where richly ornamented pillars and frames of white stone were followed by clean and pure surfaces of black marble. Ernon was particularly impressed. Not even in the high temple of Solaria had he seen artistry of such calibre. It was clearly the product of a much different and perhaps more advanced time. Gorith led them to a large hall that contained a long table of the same black marble as the walls and floors of the castle. Far beyond, at the opposite head of the table, a tall dark figure awaited them, resting on an almost throne-like chair. The whole room was lit by a beautiful spherical chandelier that resembled a moon made of thousands of small diamonds. The majesty, and indeed likely value of such an amazing artifact, left the three companions' mouths agape.
"So, what brings you here, my brilliant old friend?"
spoke Yosamold, this time with affection in his voice. The man was tall and pale, and some of his facial features reminded the thieves of Gorith, with the exception of his nose, which was smaller and a bit turned up. His black robes also reminded them of their masters, but were stunningly embellished with elaborate weavings and detailed patterns. His hair was of the purest white, and was arranged in a complicated style that was a work of art in itself.
Worry not, Yosamold. I no longer care for the future of our kind. I have grown past such trivialities,
answered Gorith, with a touch of bitterness in his voice.
"You do not? What brings you here then, if it is not to pester me with your concerns for the dull realities of our world?"
I come for 2 reasons, but first, if you may, my men are tired and are in need of rest. Would you prepare rooms for them 3?
"Ah, yes, pardon my manners. My thralls shall prepare rooms for your servants, and they are welcome to sit at my table and wait as we speak."
You may sit,
said Gorith, glancing over his shoulder at the 3 thieves. Gorith approached the table and took the seat opposite to Yosamold. The exhausted priest wasted no time, hauling his tired body to a seat a few places away from the wizard before half collapsing into the chair. The other 2, tired as they were, followed next.
"Wonderful! I shall have wine and food to regale them with, if it so pleases you,"
added the Lich, immediately catching Pepper and Ernon's attentions with his words.
That would be much appreciated, Yosamold. I have to admit, however, that I am much surprised to see you in possession of such mundane supplies. Are there any guests in your house?
"Ah, there are indeed, my friend. One mongrel girl from the northern wildwoods. Her father sent her to me in an attempt to convince me to participate in some nonsensical plan of his. I am certain you will meet her on the morrow."
I assume she has been here for long then.
"You assume right. At this rate, the poor child will end up spending the majority of her fertile years in these cold, sterile halls. But I digress. Please continue with your speech. Tell me of those 2 reasons that have brought you here."
As they spoke, the curious Pepper had begun turning around in his chair, investigating the room with his night glass. The first thing he noticed was that the chamber was a good deal dirtier than it actually seemed. Apparently, there was an illusion cast upon the whole dining hall. Some lazy wizard that Lich was, he reflected. Although, come to think of it, he would probably have done the same in his position. The fortress did look like a lot of work to keep clean. He couldn't really blame the man for hiding thousands of years of dirt under a veil of magic. This apparent realization left the thief feeling as if he was in on some kind of secret with Yosamold, which made him feel quite smart and important. His trinket wasn't so bad after all.
First, I come for information, for I have slept for more than 14 decades, and I am in dire need of knowledge, friend. I must know who the great players are, kings, great moon wizards, and sun priests of prominence.
Pepper continued scanning the hall and was especially surprised to see that Yosamold, the wizard's friend, was apparently not really there. He was invisible to the night glass. Just another illusion.
Second, my old friend, I have a spell of my own making that I suspect will be of great interest to your art. I would like to share it with you and discuss its potential to both our magics. You know I hold your opinions in great esteem.
Ah, had I known those were your motives, my dear Goreth, I would have let you in without hesitation. And my dear moon-headed champion would still be here among us,
lamented Yosamold with a smile. At that moment, to the surprise of the Crypt Cleaners, a large number of manservants began filing into the hall. They were dressed in fine black clothes and carried food and beverages on silver platters. They looked surprisingly normal, just like the men you would expect to find serving at a king's court. Pepper, however, upon raising his trinket to his curious eye, almost fell off his chair in utter horror. Their normal appearance was of course but an illusion. Beneath it, they appeared as extremely thin men, covered from head to toe in tight, oily fabric, even to the point where not a single inch of their skin was visible. Through the fabric, Pepper guessed their musculature was emaciated and sinewy, as bony protrusions at the hip and elbow were clearly visible. Even their faces were covered, and they had glyphs where Pepper expected to see eyes. The overall effect resulted in a disturbing appearance. And what was worse, something about their frame reminded him of the revenants in Goreth's crypt. The thief was instantly terrified by the sight, dropping the eyeglass to his neck and sitting bolt upright in his chair. He pushed himself back into it as one of the servants came close, leaning past him to place a silver goblet in front of him. He looked at the now normal-looking man as he poured a dark liquid into the vessel mere feet from him. Lismond and Ernon had noticed their friend's strange reaction, but were too tired to do more than offer inquisitive looks. The thief, despite his unsettling discovery, did not feel brave enough to inform the others of his findings. He felt their blue blood host would not like his illusions so crudely revealed.
Please, help yourselves to anything you wish, servants,
said the Lich to the 3 Crypt Cleaners. Lismond and Ernon did not need a second invitation, and began reaching for food straight away. Meanwhile, Pepper's eyes looked from left to right, waiting for the servants to leave his personal space. When they had withdrawn, he finally relaxed. Summoning up the courage to lift his night glass once more, he gazed at the food in front of them.
What?
Asked Ernon with a full mouth, having hungrily torn a chunk from a large turkey leg. Pepper was gazing at him through the night glass, apparently transfixed on his food.
I'm just checking,
he whispered.
Checking what?
Your dinner. Making sure it's, not a rotten rat or something.
Ernon's face dropped in response, and he looked down at the succulent piece of meat in his hand.
And?
He asked with concern.
Nah, it's fine, Ernon. You help yourself,
replied the bald thief, tucking the night glass into his shirt, relieved the food actually was what it appeared to be. Ernon sat there, not chewing, not quite sure what to make of what he'd just heard. He swallowed hard, a distasteful look on his face.
Don't say things like that. There are few pleasures in this life, and one of them is a succulent turkey leg. Don't soil my pleasure with your tomfoolery.
Just looking out for you, Ern. Just watching your back.